We're going to look at the literature review now. Now, this is part of your thesis. And basically, when we look at the literature review, we look at what does the literature say about the material that you are going to deal with. So once you've got your hypothesis, you've got your objectives down for your research, then we start looking at the literature review. And the literature review basically goes into your prospectus, and it's a big part of your prospectus, and it says, what does the literature say about the material that you're going to be dealing with? So we have to have a fairly competent one and one that looks well. Literature review, concept. This is a look at what has been published about the subject you're going to study. In order to come up with a good hypothesis, you have to see what's been done in the past. And in order to see what's been done in the past, you have to look at literature. Therefore, you do a literature review. Then you put down on paper what everybody says about that particular subject. And that becomes your basis of your literature review. The literature review is a compilation of literature that is relevant to the objectives and or materials and methods of what you are going to do. My literature review for my dissertation had 200 different pieces of information in it. I've had students where a master's thesis has had 250 different pieces in it. And a lot of times we take that because it's really a historical research paper, and we can actually go out and publish that. My literature review from my dissertation was published separately because it's a very good piece of information. You should use recent as well as historic things. It says watch the proportions. There's some people that says, you shouldn't use anything more than 20 years old. Depends on what you're looking at. If you're studying the Bible, you better have some stuff that's a little bit older than 20 years old. Now, if you are studying Zika virus, you aren't going to have much that's more than 20 years old. So when you look at it, look at the proportions. You want to keep a good basis of what's new and what is historic. The oldest piece of literature that I cited in my dissertation was from about the 1860s. I've got a copy of a bibliography that a man used to make a book on his literature review for his book, and it's got things that date back into the 1400s. And this was on turf grass. So watch the proportions. Everything that is of importance must be cited, and all topics need to be covered. If you're going to talk intelligently about something, you have to look at both sides of the coin. This side, that side. You have to come up and you have to figure out what's in there. What did one person say? What was the opposing view? And what needs to be researched? And that becomes very important here. Literature review. What are the questions? How much is necessary? Really depends on what's important to cover a topic. Now, if you've got a review paper out there that did a lot of the stuff for your topic, all you have to do is cite that paper. If you're talking about, and I'll pick on one of our students, he was dealing with grape. There's all sorts of compounds in grape that are good for you. And he went out and he did this great big human physiological stuff in his literature review that had no bearing whatsoever on what he's doing. So, how much is necessary? You have to decide that. What if someone else wrote the review? Sometimes, like I said, you find this great stuff, and all you got to say is, hey, according to so-and-so, you got this, you got this, you got this, you got this. You don't have to reproduce everything they do. One thing we often say is, if you're looking at things like materials and methods, and you've got a literature review in there, and the journal that you're getting your information from is obscure, you need to provide a lot more detail in your materials and methods. But if what you're doing was published previously in Science, hey, all you got to do is reference it. Use the culture media according to Marashi and Skoog, and that's it. And you don't have to go out there and say, hey, it's got this and this and this in it. No, people can find that. It's available anywhere. So the more obscure something, the more information you have to bring out of it. The less obscure, the less information. What about cut and paste? Do not ever cut and paste. You got to go out and you got to do that thing at the Library of Congress. Learn about plagiarism. The easiest way to avoid plagiarism is forget that you have a cut and paste key on your program. Don't ever cut and paste, because what you'll end up doing is you'll end up plagiarizing somebody, and that's not good. So when you look at it, take notes, jot down topics, unless it is absolutely essential that you have the exact words that the person said in their paper. You have no need whatsoever to cut and paste. And if you do cut and paste, you need a quotation mark before, a quotation mark afterwards, and exactly where you got that material from. Reproduce the obscure, the difficult to find, or the translated. If you translated it, reproduce what you did. I had a paper on my dissertation that was back from the 1800s, 1860s. It was written in German. I translated it. I reproduced those parts that became very important. And all I really needed was a sentence or two telling about the major ideas in it. But bring in that. If you've got a culture media again, or a growth media, or a fertilizer, something that you're, insect rearing food that is in an obscure journal, you go and you reproduce the whole thing saying, hey, we got this out of there. But if it's in a not obscure journal, just cite it. So when we look at literature review, what we're talking about, what happened in the past, what does the literature say about my topic, and make sure you look at it from both ends, talking about everything you did. Literature review is really part of the prospectus. This builds up to be able to do the research, because if you don't know what everybody else did, you can't be sure that what you're going to do hasn't already been done before, or that maybe somebody did it and it didn't work. And a lot of times you can find that out too. So when you're looking at literature review, very important part, takes a lot of work, but this is really where you start at, because if you don't know what's in the literature, you can't make a good hypothesis.